Soon, Greg Sankey of the SEC will take this very stage behind me, and is he going to announce even more realignment?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another special episode and special week of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. Live from SEC Media Days, always got you covered. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So I'm here in Dallas, and Greg Sankey, depending on when you're listening to or watching the show, is going to take this very stage right behind me, and he will undoubtedly be asked a question about conference realignment, because you walk in to the Omnia Hotel here in Dallas and you see the sign that says now 16 teams strong, which is a crazy concept, but that's of course where we've gotten ourselves to. So as Florida State and Clemson are looking to leave the ACC, that has to be the first question. If I, God willing, get the first question to ask him, I would look at what he thinks, what he believes is the best course of action with regards to Florida State and Clemson, because I've talked about this here on the show before. The SEC doesn't need anything. They've positioned themselves in a spot of such strength in the realignment landscape. They don't need to announce anything. But none of these realignment moves have ever needed to happen. The schools that moved, they weren't strapped for cash for the most part. The conferences that add them, they weren't short on national title contending teams. It's just always about more. It just means more, you could say, according to that big helmet over there. So I think that for Greg Sankey, he probably plays it down the middle. I think he keeps everything open without indicating, yeah, no, we're on the precipice of making a move. This is going to happen. We're going to make this switch, that switch, or we want to make that. Like, I would expect there to be very general answers, and for him to not give away the farm, or give away the store, I think is a better expression, about what he thinks the SEC should do. Because Florida State and Clemson have absolute television value. Are they tapping into new markets? No, they do not. As football brands, though, they're as strong as any that are available in the realignment landscape, along with Notre Dame. Notre Dame is number one. Any conference would love to get Notre Dame, but they're just so strong and powerful and unique that they're probably not going to wind up in a conference in the next several years. I'm hard-pressed to say Notre Dame never winds up in a conference. The Big Ten would be a logical choice, but they've also got contractual ties with their other sports, with the ACC, and certainly that's not a conference that you'd want to join right now, especially once FSU and Clemson, in all likelihood, are able to get out. So bringing this back to the SEC, they have to look at Florida State and Clemson and say, that makes our football conference stronger. But if they don't go to the SEC, the only other place they're going to be willing to go is the Big Ten. I am not of the belief they would even ponder leaving the ACC for the Big 12. I think they would stay in the ACC before they went to the Big 12, because financially, logistically, brand-wise, there is no massive appeal to going to the Big 12 versus being in the ACC. You're essentially in the same spot that you are right now, and it would cost you a bunch of money to leave. So that does not track. So the SEC, if they're not going to add anybody, they have to be willing to let Florida State and Clemson, and or maybe they would add one and pick up somebody else. I don't know. I struggle to say that anything can't happen or that it's off the table. It could never happen because, well, here we are. Stanford plays in the Atlantic Coast Conference. That's driving distance to the Pacific Ocean. So anything can make sense nowadays. If they look at Florida State and Clemson and say, no, these are not schools we are going to add right now, that's obviously stemming from the presidents who are of the belief, and justifiably so, that the conference doesn't need any more teams, that even though they could provide value, maybe they would just dilute the schedule a little bit. And I wonder, too, about the timing of this for the SEC, because if you look at Florida State and Clemson, with the caliber of programs that they're capable of running, they serve as a potential hindrance to getting more teams into the playoff. it's true for the Big Ten as well. The Big Ten might view them as national championship winning and capable schools that, football-wise, we want to add to strengthen the league to keep up with the SEC or pull ahead of the SEC. And we don't have as many national championship caliber programs, but the SEC's got to look around and say, look, we've got Georgia, we've got Bama, we've got LSU. If Florida were to ever figure it out, we've seen them at their peak. What if Tennessee ever really gets the ball rolling? Like, I understand not all of those programs are on the same footing, but the SEC has more programs that you can look at and say, yeah, they're just not that far away from being able to win a national championship. And I think that also applies to Kalen DeBoer now down at Alabama, of course, being able to keep that going. I'm very high on Kalen DeBoer as a coach. So if they decide that they don't want Florida State and Clemson, they're going to do, those two schools, whatever is needed to get into the Big Ten. I've seen this narrative before. Maybe it's more just online chatter, but, well, what about the Big Ten not wanting, Paul Feinbaum said Florida State's not a fit in the Big Ten. Like, if Florida State wants to join the Big Ten, I think the Big Ten is going to take them. Because if the SEC outright says we do not want Florida State and Clemson, we're already in those markets, we don't need those schools, we don't need more teams to cannibalize our own and keep teams out of the playoff and whatnot, that's a valid position to take. That actually gives more leverage to the Big Ten. They can then make them take an offer that is reminiscent of Oregon and Washington getting into the Big Ten, which is, hey, we have to be here because we can't be anywhere else. Or Stanford and Cal into the ACC. Hey, you don't need to give us much. We'll figure it out, make it happen. Just please give us a home. Give us a seat at the table. Allow us to be a part of one of the best conferences in the country. So that's, I think, a fascinating chess piece that will play out in the coming months. But the other thing strategically the SEC might be looking at is if these court rulings with the ACC and Florida State and Clemson and their lawsuits and counter lawsuits all going on, if that all gets settled and everyone understands what they're going to have to do in the 2025 season, I think they're still going to be in the ACC even if they get out. I think they're gone by 26. Depending on when the move gets made, the SEC might be able to let this college football season play out. Because if you're a conference, what your priority is to add the best football programs possible, the highest number of quality football programs possible, so that you can do what? Get into the playoff, win a national championship. That's the goal. Get the most teams into the playoff. That's how you make the most money, because you get a team in, you make money, and yada, yada, yada. I think we all understand that. So the SEC and Greg Sankey might want to look at how the committee judges a 12-team playoff. I have long documented and will continue to state my opposition, if I'd had a vote, on the 12-team college football playoff. Given that it is here, I can still recognize there are positive or intriguing elements to it. One of them is, how does the committee view things like a 9-3 SEC versus a 10-2 Big 12? Is it truly schedule dependent? Are they just going to look at record? Are they not going to consider record as strongly as others? Like, it's an ongoing debate. It's a debate we've had for a long time in college football. It's going to continue, just on a grander scale, with teams that are far further away from being able to win a national championship, but can get into the 12-team playoff. If 9-3 SEC teams are getting the sort of credibility they need to be at-large playoff teams, then maybe they take a harder look at Florida State and Clemson and say, no, now they're just coming in strengthening the league. We don't want the Big Ten to catch us. They're already adding 4 high-profile West Coast programs, television markets, football brands, and the like, with Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA. So maybe they'd look and say, if we can get 9-3 teams into the playoff, then adding FSU and Clemson is more beneficial. But very curious to see what Greg Sankey has to say on that. And on the scheduling front, should the SEC go to a 9-game schedule? Fundamentally, I think the answer is yes. It's not a simple yes. It's a complex yes. That's coming up next. Coming up right now is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They've got over 122 million parts. That's a lot for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. So another matter that we will all be anxiously waiting to hear the SEC commissioner's words on are whether the SEC should go to a 9-game conference schedule. Because on the surface, I 100% side with those frustrated at the late season SEC cupcakes. I cannot stand it. It is maddening. You have schools playing top 25 opponents. You have, borderline rivalries playing out in late November. You've got playoff pushes. And then SEC teams can play one half of football, get up 63-3, and rest their starters for a half. I do not care for that component. The easy solution is to go to a 9-game conference schedule, something that I am in favor of. However, there is an alternative if it is not the position of the SEC that they want to move to a 9-game conference schedule. And this goes back to the point that I was just making about how the committee is going to view SEC and Big Ten teams versus ACC and Big 12 teams in the 12-team playoff. How are games going to be treated? How are records going to be treated? How will ranked wins hold up over time? These are all factors that we can't estimate right now. I know we've had the 4-team playoff before, but do you think the committee is putting the same sort of time and effort and thought into the rankings past the top 4, past the top 6, really, that they are the top 6? Look, they might say they are. They might be. I can't imagine the stakes feel exactly the same when you're just ranking teams to rank them versus ranking teams that could get an at-large berth to get into the playoff and, potentially make a run for a national championship. I am not of the opinion that the lower-seeded teams are going to be able to do that because that plays out in college football every single year, but that's a slightly different conversation there. So if you're the SEC and looking at adding a 9th game in a league that is now objectively stronger with Texas and Oklahoma in it, the same dilemma is right in front of them, which is, hey, if we're going to play an extra game, we need some sort of assurance that our 10-2 teams are going to be a lock, that 10-2 suddenly feels like the old 11-1, that 9-3 teams have a legitimate chance to get in, or else you won't get anybody to go for it. You won't get athletic directors or presidents or anybody to go for it if that is not presented to them. So that's a conversation for Greg Sankey to have perhaps with the College Football Playoff Committee and understand where their thinking is and how, if at all, I could be wrong in thinking it would change or have a greater sense of importance to them, but you never know, how, if at all, the committee's thinking about ranking teams that could be at-large playoff berth teams would potentially change. So the late season cupcakes are patently ridiculous. I hope we're all on board with that. I'm sure we're not. I'm sure there are people who think it's okay. I just don't. I just don't. That sort of stuff is for the non-conference slate. Once conference play begins, you should only be playing conference games. However, I think there are some who are not aware that one of the reasons that the SEC plays an 8-game conference schedule is because they have built-in matchups with the ACC. Games like Florida and Miami, or games like Georgia and Georgia Tech, or South Carolina and Clemson. These are games that happen regularly, depending on which matchup you look at, every year. Now, some teams have a stronger built-in ACC opponent than others. That's not necessarily the fault of Georgia, that Georgia Tech has been mediocre to below average for the better part of a decade now, and they haven't been a relevant opponent for a long time. They could be this year. Brent Key is definitely the head coach of a sleeper team in the ACC, not necessarily to win the ACC, but to just make some noise, beat a team you don't expect them to. They did that last year when they beat Miami. That was more due to a separate issue that I won't mention on the show, but we all know which one I'm talking about, of course. So I think if you look at a team schedule and you have an ACC opponent built into your non-conference slate, and then you have another non-conference opponent that is in a power conference, I'm far more sympathetic to those schools saying, hey, we've got these matchups built in for many, many years because college football scheduling is broken. But anyway, I'm more sympathetic to the schools that say we've got this ACC matchup that we play every year, Clemson, South Carolina, for instance, or Florida, Florida State. And we don't really want to play them another power conference team and then add a 9th SEC conference game, because that's not fair to us. Because now we're playing a schedule that isn't just in theory tougher than everybody else's, but on paper is tougher than everyone else's. Because a typical power conference team is going to play 9 conference games, 1 Power 4 out of conference game, a group of 5, and an FCS. That's what I think the right model is. Now, you have exceptions. There are schedules that look a lot tougher than that. There are schedules that look a lot easier than that. There have been schedules in the non-conference slate, depending on the school that you're talking about, that have played 3 teams that are barely even group of 5 level, and one of them an FCS. And then there's, Florida's schedule. Yeah. Good luck. Because they've got Miami and Florida State on the schedule. And so that's another great example about how you need to treat, or how is the committee going to treat teams like that. Because if you took Florida, if you took this iteration of the Florida Gators, and, Billy Napier has spoke at length. I'm sure we'll hear from him plenty this week about how confident he is in the process they have and the team that they're going to put on the field, the weapons they've got. I loved the Elijah Badger addition on the perimeter. I thought that was a really, really important pickup for their offense. That is a wide receiver 1 caliber guy coming over from Arizona State to help out Graham Mertz at the quarterback position. Still, there is no schedule in college football where you play 2 non-conference games against legitimate power conference contenders. They happen to be in the same league, but even if they were in different leagues, it would be insane. It would be ridiculous. Another school that has a really, really tough non-conference schedule over in the Big 12 is Arizona. They play Kansas State in a non-conference game because it was already scheduled. So they're playing 10 Power 4 opponents this season. And there are other schools that play as few as 8. I am supportive of there being unanimity in the number of Power 4 conference games. Good Scrabble word if you can make it work, kind of. Anyway, I am supportive of there being a uniform standard for what teams have to do. You should have to play at least 9 Power 4 conference games. But then there should be an understanding, if you're an SEC team and you keep it an 8-game conference schedule and you want to play your 8 ACC opponents and your ACC matchup, but then you play a week non-conference, don't come back crying later if you are then punished in the schedule or in the college football playoff rankings for that week non-conference slate. And this is why I think college football needs a governing body, an entity to oversee the entire sport. I don't think it's anywhere close to happening. I'd happily run for commissioner if anyone would nominate me, but I think I could do it. Maybe, possibly. Yeah, I think it'd be okay. So I think that if you're in that sort of situation where you have 9 Power 4 opponents, but then you have 3 really, really weak games here, the discussion about, well, the conference schedule is just so tough, it's this, it's that. It's like, well, wait a minute, that team over there played a group of 5 champion caliber team and 10 Power 4 schools, and you played 9 Power 4 schools, and none of them were conference championship caliber. Like that, those two things are not balanced. So, and again, it depends on which conference you're talking about, because a Big 12 schedule and a Big 10 schedule are not the same. An SEC schedule and ACC schedule are not the same. It's one of the most exciting things I think about the 12-team playoff is how are they going to treat that? And I think it will have downstream effects in how the SEC views itself and how strong it needs its league to be. Because if a 9-3 SEC team is getting 0 shot to make the college football playoff because they're putting in a 10-2 Big 12, I don't think there's any way the SEC adds Florida State and Clemson. It's not like they need the money. Their television contract is over $1 billion. All their programs, they're doing just fine financially. They're doing just fine. They don't need to make up some revenue gap. Quite the opposite. They're pulling away from everybody else. But if 9-3 SEC this year, in this version of the playoff, with Florida State and Clemson in the ACC, if they get a 9-3 team into the playoff, then maybe they'd consider it. But on the 9-game conference schedule, I see the arguments going both ways. I just don't see I still think a 9-game conference slate is the best way to go. I think that gives the best product for fans across the country, whether you're in the SEC footprint or outside of the SEC footprint. And if you want to have a relative unavailability across your conference for non-conference games with the Big 10, the Big 12, or high-level group of 5 because you have those built-in matchups with the ACC, fine. That's fine. All I'm concerned about as a college football fan is everyone playing to the relative same standard strength of schedule so that we can accurately measure teams at the end of the year, because the playoff is still, aside from the auto bids, which I think are ridiculous, an invitational and a resume contest. So I'm interested to see what Greg Sankey has to say on the matter. EA College Football 25 is all but here, and look, this is just going to be great for the sport. It's going to be great for the sport, and I'll tell you why coming up next. So this is the week that many of us have waited for more than 10 years. We are all Sirius Black in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. We have done our waiting, and EA College Football, it is essentially here. Some of you might be playing it by the time you listen to or watch this show. So I think this is going to be so fantastically good. Not just because I think the game is being well developed. And there was a Twitch stream with a couple producers on the game who I thought did a remarkably good job laying out the details that are going into this game that give you the most, what's the word I'm looking for? The most immersive, the most enhanced college football experience. I loved this game is coming back. I played this game as a kid so much. I've played the revamped version that went around online. I played NCAA 14. I've played Online Dynasties. I'm such a massive fan of the game. And I think the attention to detail in this game is going to really, really excite the people that play it, which will eventually include myself. Tragically, I won't be able to play it until late next week, because I'm on the road. I'm here in Dallas. Next week, I'm in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days, and so I'm not going to be home to be able to play it, but it's going to be there waiting for me, and my excitement level is absolutely, positively through the roof. So the reason I think this is great is because the ability for college football fans specifically to enhance their experience and go even deeper on the traditions and the pageantry and just the rich history of college football into a game that they can control, that they can play, I think is absolutely fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And when you look at what college football has done over the last several years with all this change, this is one change. It's not so much a change as it is a return to the norm of having a new college football game come out every year. I think the inclusion of NIL, which I'll touch on in a moment, is going to help the game. But having that tradition back where people can play as their favorite team, watch their favorite team, and then play again as their favorite team later, or go back to building their dynasty at Middle Tennessee, or build Liberty into the top 5 college football program that some people think it could one day become with the financial backing they've got, or look at an random program from anywhere. You can realign conferences. You have the uniforms that everybody has, the mascots, the players. It's all great. And this is the next point I want to touch on. I completely understand those who are frustrated, disappointed, upset, discouraged by the constant change in college football right now. I get it. I'm someone who is averse to change. I don't want, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I am a fan of routine. I like things to stay the same. I know that some things have to change, and I adapt when I have to. But on the whole, if something's good, don't mess with it. It's good. Why would you mess with it? There's no reason to. So the NIL portal realignment, it's a lot of change to throw at the sport. But the NIL component in particular is significantly going to enhance your playing of this game, because we all played the college football game growing up, and we played, versions with guys on the covers who weren't in the game anymore because they could then make money off of their name, image, and likeness. the NIL collectives are not what, quote unquote, pure NIL is supposed to be. It's not what it is intended to when it was legalized. That's not in the spirit of NIL. It's all legal, just to be clear. It's allowed. It's just not what I think the fundamental push behind NIL legalization had in mind. Their point, one which I agree with, is if you are a well-known college football player and you have an athletic department that is putting your face on tickets or publicizing you on posters or using you in social media posts or selling jerseys with your number on it, you should be able to get a kickback of that money. I don't think that part of NIL is even that controversial. But before you go bashing NIL and it's all bad, it's all terrible, just remember, you're going to play a game, if you're an EA College Football 25 fan, that has Travis Hunter and Quinn Ewers and Donovan Edwards on the cover of it. And those guys are going to be in the game. The last game that came out, 2013, it was NCAA 14. Denard Robinson was on the cover. He wasn't in the game. He wasn't there. That wasn't a thing. You can then play with him in the game. He had to have moved on. He had to be out of college. This is a substantial benefit and creates an experience that we've never actually had before as players of the college football video game. Because yeah, there have been rosters that get made over the years that, are available online. You download and you put them in, but it's not the same. It's not the same because now you have actual guys in there, their throwing style, their number, their mannerism, the name on the back of their jersey, that sort of stuff. Those little details that we didn't have before, I think is going to make this game feel even more special. Because before, if you were, say, a fan of Alabama back in the day, sure, you could hand the ball off to halfback number 2 and know that it's Derrick Henry because he's listed at 6'3", 240 pounds. But now you're going to see it. Now you're going to feel it. It's going to be a whole new experience. It's similar in the sense that it's a college football video game. And we all know what those are. And we all know why those are great. Because I can build Army into a powerhouse, win a national championship, and then bolt because Ball State has got an opening. And I want to go build them up from a bottom dweller in the Mid-American Conference to a national powerhouse in college football. And I want to establish recruiting pipelines. I want to bring in certain types of players. I want to have my own playbooks. And I mean, the whole 9 yards is just such an experience to enhance our enjoyment of this wonderful, as I say on every show, the greatest sport on earth, college football. So I'm so excited to play. I'm so excited to play. I've seen all these clips. I've watched all these, videos about what's in the game and announcers talking about it. The marketing on this thing has just been chef's kiss. It has been flawlessly executed. They give you a little bit here. They give you a little bit there. They give you a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And now, anyone listening to or watching the show who's going to plan to play the game, how much higher could your excitement level be? I'm trying to remember the last time I was this excited for a video game. I don't know that I've ever been this excited to have a video game. Not just because of the return of something that was taken away from us long ago as college football fans, but because of what this game is being billed as. The stakes are high. The reviews for those who have played the game are very high. They're very, very high. So I'm going to close today's show on this note, and I hope many of you will take this up. I think it can be wildly fun. Once you start playing the game, and you will all be playing it before me, send me DM, YouTube comment, however, Twitter mention, at @McLaughlin_CFB is the handle. Send me what you think is either accurate, ridiculous, or you're not really sure that is in the game, and how it relates to real life. If you think Colorado is way overrated, and that's your take, Colorado's overrated, look at what they are in this game, can they be that in real life? Let me know. Give me your hottest, one way or the other, in favor of or against takes on what exists in that college football video game that you have experienced that you don't think plays out in real life. Hey, they've got this team's offense at this overall. I don't think they could possibly achieve that. By all means, fire away. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.